Well, good morning, everyone. Meteorologist Michael Wilhite here with SouthernIndianaWeather.com, bringing you the latest long-range update. It is Saturday morning, the 16th of December already, as I am recording this for you. We'll jump right into it here. You know, in the short term, a little bit of rain moves in tomorrow. I know that's not what you're wanting to talk about. You're wanting to talk about the Christmas storm. We'll get there. Rain moves in a little bit overnight. We could actually use it, especially places out here in Missouri. They could desperately use it. Same down in Arkansas with the drought going on down there. For us, we are a little dry up here, though, so some showers will be a welcome change. You can see here by, early in the morning time, this is still the overnight into the early morning hours, you got some showers starting to break out. About the time you get to about 7 a.m. or so here, you got widespread showers all over the area, and then those will last for a good little while. Here's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they're still around, and then by about 5 o'clock, you're starting to see them move out. So some spotty showers. You're not looking at really much of anything in the way of rain. Totals with this, a few hundredths of an inch most likely, maybe a tenth or two if you're lucky. So nothing significant out of it. It is going to be warm. Temperatures are going to continue to stay warm. In fact, most of the rest of this week, going to see temperatures in either the 40s or the 50s. So pattern has certainly relaxed a little bit. It'll come back with a vengeance. If you take a look at the new Euro weeklies that just came out a couple of nights ago, here's what you see. You see that that pattern relaxing, and basically what you've got here is, you had a very highly amplified jet stream, sort of like this, which was dumping cold over into the country. Well, now what you've got is a jet stream that's sort of more like this. You don't have that highly amplified, and so you got mild Pacific air being pumped into the country. As a result, you end up with some warmer weather around here. So that might be a welcome change for some of you anyway. But don't get used to it, because by the time you get into not this upcoming week, that's when we stay mild next week, but the week after that, you notice the cold starts to bleed back in, and you notice we've got this zone setting up here. All right. So here's what you've got going on. You've got this massive cold regime coming across the country, and then you've got the southeast ridge starting to flare up just a little bit here, and then look what you've got right in between. Right in between, you've got this zone right in here of what we would call the baroclinic zone. The baroclinic zone is just a zone, think of it as sort of battleground. This is where the temperatures clash with each other. You've got you've got this very, very cold regime over here that wants to press downward, and then over here what you have is this very warm regime. Now, how much can it press this way as well? Where they meet in the middle, that's what we call the baroclinic zone, and that is the perfect place for a storm to track. And indeed, what we're going to find is that a low pressure is going to form just right before Christmas on the base of this trough, somewhere down in here. And then it's likely going to ride that baroclinic zone somewhere, which would put the low pressure in that storm system sort of right through us. And that's the main setup that we're going to have to talk about today, as far as to exactly how this is going to play out. All right, and as you go forward here, then the cold starts to take over the majority of the country. In fact, the Euro just doesn't let that southeast ridge win out. Keep that in mind. Then as you go later into January, you do start to see a moderation again. So it is a La Nina winter. These ups and downs like that, I think, are very reasonable. So let's talk about the Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Christmas Eve storm. It's going to vary in the modeling as far as what comes through, but the idea is Christmas weekend. All right. So let's first, before we even go into the modeling, let's talk about some of our organic forecasting methods. And let's just establish the fact that there's going to be a storm. And let's establish the fact that the modeling is going to vary about it until we get close to time, because that's the way it always does. The Bering Sea rule will suggest that we've got a storm. So with the Bering Sea rule, basically what you've got going on here in the Bering Sea, which the Bering Sea is right up in here. What you've got going on in the Bering Sea is what you're going to see in the U.S. around 17 to 21 days later. Current correlation I'm working with is about 19 days. And so the black X that you got here, think of this as Indiana, and this yellow box, this kind of a bluish purple box that you see here, think of that as the United States. Well, what have you got? You've got a low pressure system developing here, Oklahoma, Texas. You got one coming up to your north as well. If I showed you the future frames on this, the low sort of tracks like this. Very, very similar then to what you see should happen with what the Euro Weeklies was showing you where that baroclinic zone is. And so this was valid on the 6th of December, and if you add 19 days later, you get about the 24th, 25th. So you've got a potential Christmas storm of some sort. Now, when I say storm of some sort, you got to understand, this could be rain, this could be snow, this could be ice, this could be various components of all of that, not necessarily a winter storm. Who gets what precipitation type is impossible to determine this far out, as I'm going to show you here in a minute. Bering Sea rule, not the only one showing this. The East Asia rule showing the same thing. We've got a trough swinging through Asia this weekend, and whenever you've got a trough swinging through Asia, basically that's a correlation of about 6 to 7 days is what I'm working with now. About 6 to 10 days later in general. This is a little map I whipped up for my blog post a couple of days ago. But this would suggest that you've got a trough moving through the eastern half of the country right around the 24th, 25th. So you've got a couple of organic forecasting methods, and by organic we're saying we're not using the modeling. We're actually using something that's going on in the atmosphere to say this is what should happen. It's actually using meteorology instead of modelology. There's a lot of people out there that want to be model huggers. Let's go to these kind of forecasting methods first, and then look at what the models should be doing. Then you can identify some things as to whether the models are working right or whether they're just doing normal GFS things and being wrong. All right, so we've got an established fact here. We're going to have a storm somewhere around there. Could be big, could be small. You don't necessarily know that. Modeling has blown it up into something pretty big, but we got something going on here. So this is kind of a map that I whipped up earlier in the week just to kind of give you an idea. And again, here's what you've got going on. You've got a low pressure that's going to develop somewhere down in here. You've got the warm southeast ridge over here starting to flare up a little bit. And then beyond that, what you have is this cold air regime taking over. And then right in between that, you have this battle zone here in the purple, and that's where the storm track is probably the likeliest to go. And look where we are right here in southern Indiana, right there in that battle zone, in my opinion. So basically, to give you kind of an idea of what to look for, there's really about 4 different options. I guess 5 different options. One option could be no storm at all, but I think we've already established it here with the Bering Sea rule, the East Asia rule. I can show you the recurring Rossby wave train. I can show you the SOI index change. All of the organic forecasting methods are pointing to something. So it's pretty much established fact that I believe that we're going to have something. It's a question of what at this point. We're going to have it somewhere in the eastern United States. It doesn't necessarily mean you will be affected by it. We've got to determine out that track by now. So you got basically 4 options. First off, let's just think about it. If the southeast ridge, if this builds up down here a little stronger than expected, guess what? Everything pushes back to the north a little bit. The snow zone becomes more up in here. The battle zone becomes more up in here, and we could just be burned with rain right down here in southern Indiana. That's a real possibility. Well, what if the southeast ridge here is overplayed or virtually non-existent? Everything comes back to the south if that's the case. And right now, we have forecast to develop up here what we call a negative EPO, and a negative East Pacific Oscillation. And it's not just forecast to be negative, it is forecast to stink and tank. And whenever it is forecast to go that negative, what you always have is cold just sort of bleed into the central plains here. Just invade it, and then it always bleeds south and east after that. I have a feeling I wouldn't be worried too much about this going too much more north. I have a feeling you got to worry about it more going south, and I'm going to show you that in the modeling in a minute. The reason why is because whenever you've got this negative EPO up here that's so strong like the modeling indexes are hinting at for us, I just don't know whether this southeast ridge can really maintain it. I think the southeast ridge may be a little bit overplayed here, which is why I put this graphic out where we are. If the southeast ridge sets up just perfectly, it could put us in a sweet spot where we're in the battle zone here, like I've got on this map. If the cold air invasion is even more stronger than the Model C, again, all of this could be pushed down to the south. So, we've got multiple options on the table here. Let me show you a little bit before we call it quits here for the video of what the options are saying. So this was the overnight GFS, the one that was ran at 1 in the morning. And here we are, we're coming out. First off, let me back this up a little bit. So right before Christmas, at the end of next week, that's whenever all of our warm temperatures are going to change. Expect, low 50s, even mid 50s at time here in southern Indiana next week until you get to about Thursday, Friday. In that time frame, notice what you got coming in. You got a weather maker coming in. Little clipper system diving down here is going to be a front with it. This run is not particularly excited about moisture with it, but it's going to usher in a much colder regime. And at the same time, what you've got going down on here is the jet stream taking a nosedive, and so you're going to have cyclogenesis go down here. Cyclogenesis is a fancy word for low pressure formation. You're going to see a low pressure start to deform down in here, and it's going to start to ride that thermal gradient, that baroclinic zone that I showed you in the Euro Weeklies, the warm air down here from the southeast ridge, the cold air invading from that negative EPO, forcing it to come into the country, and the storm's sort of going to ride up that. Now the exact storm path got to be determined yet. On this particular run, there's your low pressure, and you notice your low pressure is sort of formed down in here, and it's sort of taking a ride right up in here. And as it does, what you've got is most of the precipitation staying out of Indiana. You get a little bit in here, but you get actually some ice in the purple here and some snow in the blue. You get kind of it mixing in across southern Indiana and Kentucky out of this, and then you've got high pressure moving back down in here from the north that sort of squelches everything else out after that. Now, let's go back one run prior of the GFS. One run prior of the GFS, there is that Clipper system forecast to move in. It's a little bit more, it has some oomph. It has some tenacity with this one. If you see there's some fortitude. There's a little bit more moisture here. And you see that brings possibly some snow in with us, some rain, maybe a mix of some rain and snow or some ice down in here in the purple, and then snow on the backside as it comes through. So it's going to get very cold on Thursday behind this and into Friday. And then there's that low pressure starting to form down here. And then watch what this does. No, I don't want the sounding viewer. Come on now. Watch what this does. High pressure starts to build in here, though, on this one you notice. High pressure is going to squelch this down to the south if that's the case, and that's going to say, nope, you can't come that far north. And so as a result of this, you get a pretty hefty snowstorm right over Kentucky. It bleeds a little bit into southern Indiana, but not for everybody, and you've got some ice concerns there potentially as well with this before more high pressure moves down and sort of squelches it. Well, that's the option. I said, what if this southeast ridge is overplayed and the EPO is stronger than what the models were seeing? You get it suppressed to the south. That's the trend over the past couple of days. The Euro yesterday was featuring a pretty hefty snowstorm and ice storm here for Tennessee Valley and into Kentucky, and bled a little bit of that up into us. The Euro last night suppressed it even further south. So is there still a chance that this goes back north into us? Absolutely. The track is not nailed down at all yet. But what you're seeing the modeling do right now is trying to figure out just how strong is this Arctic air invasion going to be, and how strong is that southeast ridge going to be able to provide some pushback to it. Right now, we're not going to be able to know what the modeling is going to say in that for a few days. I think it's going to be Wednesday or Thursday before we really start to get, I think, maybe a better picture of where we're going with this. So I think all options are on the table at this point. So what do I think as far as the options? You're going to have a low pressure develop down here somewhere. I think an option down here to the south is a very reasonable option. I also think that, a path right through here could be a very reasonable option as well. Those are the two best options that I see. Not really a path right through southern Indiana per se, but maybe a path through Kentucky, sort of like this and on up, is where I see the most favored option. And if it doesn't go there, then I think you're going to look at a path more like this. The question is going to be high pressure up to the north. How fast does it squeeze on us? Does this force this down? Is it not quite as strong up here? There are a lot more questions than there are answers, unfortunately, at this point. Just to give you an idea of some snow, I know this is early. Don't look at these numbers and think, oh my gosh, we're going to get 5 inches of snow out here. This is nothing more than guidance at this point. It won't verify, but just to give you an idea what the modeling is saying, this was the overnight run of the GFS. There's a little bit of snow for us, and that's all we're looking at right now, really, at these. I'm not looking at totals per se. I'm looking at the idea, is there snow or not? And then you see one run prior. Last night, the GFS buried Kentucky in snow, and you got the counties right along the Ohio River in that as well. So again, just the idea here I wanted to show you is the idea of snow is alive and well. It's just going to be a question for us at this point of where's it going to go. All right. The Euro last night just absolutely hammered Kentucky with this major snowstorm here, and you can see the path. That the Euro took for a path sort of along with this, and then just hammered snow onto the north side of that low. The latest Euro. This was the Euro from yesterday morning, and the latest Euro suppressed it even further south. Don't be surprised if this waffles back and forth about a dozen more times by the time we get to the event. I'd almost bet it will. One of the best things that we can do is just look at the ensemble members. The ensemble members, individual perturbations of the operational model, the GFS or the Euro. Basically, all they do is they just tweak the initial conditions to account for the fact that we don't have the atmosphere perfectly modeled. And when you tweak that and you run it again a certain number of times, for example, the Euro has 50 different members. Here's all 50 of those individual members. You can look at the individuals, and then you take them as a mean, and you can get an idea that's maybe accounts for more of that error kind of averaged out a little bit. But by looking at the individuals, you can say, is there potential? Absolutely. And so you see several of these that, there's a snowstorm right here. That one gives us some. This one's to our north up here. This one is right through Indiana. This one is a major through Indiana. That's down just a little bit to our south. That's up towards Indy. That one's a Tennessee Valley snowstorm. This one's right for southern Indiana. That's Kentucky and southern Indiana. That one's well to our north up here. That one is a direct hit for what the operationalist is saying here. And then there's more, so you get the idea. And if I show you the other 25 members of that as well, you kind of see the exact same things. There are some pretty big hitting snowstorms in here on these individual members. That one's a really big one right there. That one goes well to our north. This one's a direct hit and is huge right for southern Indiana. So again, you see that. If you look at the GFS, you can see the same thing. There's only 20 ensemble members in the GFS instead of 50 with the Euro, but you get the idea. And on the GFS, there's a mega storm right over us here. That's a solid hit. That's a major one right there. Major one for Kentucky, bleeds into Indiana. Big one for our area too. Another big one for our area here. There's a pretty big one. There's a major one in our area. I mean, there's a major one right there on this one. There's a pretty big one just to our south and west a little bit, but not quite into us yet. But you get the idea as you look through these. There are plenty of these ensemble members that would suggest to us that snow chances are alive and well, folks. So don't give up on this if you are a snow lover yet. The pattern is what we're going to have to figure out. We know that low is going to form. We know there's going to be a baroclinic zone. Exactly how strong is that ridge and exactly how strong is this cold blast? As the models get that figured out, that's when we can nail down that path. But folks, it's going to be a few days. That's where we know right now. Rain, snow, ice for southern Indiana, all on the table at this point. Hopefully we'll know more a little bit later this week. I'm meteorologist Michael Wilhite for SouthernIndianaWeather.com. Have a great Saturday, folks. See you soon.